Welcome to the people who are joining us this afternoon for this talk by Joanna Chmara. And I'll be handing over to her in, well, a minute or so, a couple of minutes, but we'll just wait for people to log on. I can see that there are already about 50 people. I would imagine that number will increase. Now, a few messages before we start. First of all, thank you for taking part in this. Thank you to Joanna, obviously, and thank you to Tim and Laura for organising the festival. It's been going now since 2015, a mixture of virtual events like this and in-person events in Clitheroe, and then for the first time last year up in Coniston. And they've all been very enjoyable events. They're run by volunteers, mainly Tim and Laura and their friends and family. And the speakers do their job for free as well. But a reminder that there are costs involved. So although all the talks are free, I think, quite rightly, they want it to be as inclusive as possible. If you are in a position to make a donation, the recommended donation is £5 per talk, or if you've visited or taken part in a few of the talks, then a £20 donation for the whole of the festival. And Graham, who is doing the technical side of this, in a few minutes he'll put a link in the chat to the PayPal. In fact, I can just see Laura's done that, put the PayPal link there, so that's brilliant. Now, when you use the chat, remember that please introduce yourself wherever you're coming from, and remember to set the setting to everyone rather than just yourself and panelists, I think it says. Otherwise, nobody will see what your words of wisdom are. And if you've got any questions, and hopefully there will be questions for Joanna, then put them in the Q&A, and then towards the end of the hour, I'll ask Joanna all the questions that you've been asking. So I think I've said more or less everything I needed to say. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Joanna to talk about cycling in the Balkans. So over to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Andrew. So hi everyone, and thanks for joining me for this talk. And yeah, as I mentioned, we will be talking about cycling in the Balkans today. I'm gonna just share my screen. Okay. So I actually wanted to start this presentation by saying that me and the Balkans and cycling there was love at first sight. And then I kind of realized that it isn't true, because before my first cycle tour, I had a false start with the Balkans. So I visited Montenegro in 2013 with some friends. We brought our bike, and we rented a house on the coast near Kotor Bay, and we wanted to just discover the coast on the bikes. And it turned out that it's harder than we thought. So I wasn't in probably my best shape back then, and it was super heaty. The climbs were super long, and the heat didn't make it easier. And so after a few rides that were shorter than 30 kilometers, we all assumed that Balkans are just not the best place for cycling. And yeah, so 5 years later, I came back. I found myself cycling through Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, covering many kilometers a day, like over 100 kilometers a day, sometimes, with a lot of stuff on my bike. And obviously, I was in a much better shape when it comes to cycling then. I cycled a lot at home. I regularly commuted by bike to work. I did a lot of longer rides on weekends. And yeah, I just wanted to try something new. I wanted to start new adventures. And so I quit my office job. I went to Switzerland first. And from there, I cycled with absolutely no plan. I didn't know where I want to go. I didn't do much research. I just said, okay, I'm gonna see day by day where where my bike takes me. And I was cycling more or less east, and inevitably I ended up in the Balkans. And since that trip, that ended a bit prematurely because my knee was injured, so I wasn't able to continue cycling. Um, but after this trip, I absolutely fell in love with the Balkans and kept coming back and back again with my bike. And one of the reasons why I fell in love with this region is because the people there are just extremely kind, generous, and authentic. And so this is a picture, for example, of my couchsurfing host in Slovenia with Jerka, and she was showing me all the most beautiful places in her country. Yes, Tom, I think I see someone showing that they want to speak. Okay. Yeah. So coming back to the talk, Jerka was my host in Slovenia, in Bosnia. This is a picture with just a random stranger who was so kind to invite me for a coffee when she just saw me on the side of the road looking for looking at my phone, checking the directions, and she just called me. She just said, "Oh, do you want some coffee? Do you want something to eat?" And I had plenty of encounters like that later on. This is a picture from my trip in North Macedonia in 2021. I was camping. I was wild camping next to a small church in the mountains, and that was on a weekend. So I was very aware of the fact that I would have to probably wake up early and pack my stuff so that in case people would come to the church for a Sunday service, so that I don't bother anyone, so that they don't see my friends. I was glad because this group of people came early and they came to clean the church to prepare for the service. And after they were finished, they just invited me for breakfast. They gave me some food for the road. And this is a picture from Albania a year later. A family that invited me also for a coffee, for food. And they were so keen to try my bike to see how it feels riding with so much stuff. And they were simply shocked that I'm even there in the mountains with so much stuff. And yeah, they just thought it was such a stupid, ridiculous idea that I'm even attempting to cross a mountain pass on a very poor, muddy road on a bike with so much luggage on the back. But another reason why the Balkans, in my opinion, are the best place to cycle in Europe is because of the mountains. So all of the Balkans are basically just mountains. It's it's not easy. It's demanding all the time. You're struggling. You're going uphill, but there's so much diversity. There's so many different landscapes, um, and the mountains, the nature is so wild, so unexplored compared to other parts of Europe. So you have the Julian Alps in Slovenia. You have the Dinaric Alps that cover most of the Balkan Peninsula, and part of them is the Durmitor Mountains in Montenegro. Then in Albania, you have Albanian Alps or accursed mountains. In Bosnia, we have beautiful, beautiful massive of Bjelašnica. In Macedonia, Kosovo, Albania, you have the Shar Mountains. South of Albania, you have Pindus Mountains. So there's so many different landscapes, and most of the time you're cycling without seeing any people for kilometers, maybe just meeting some dogs that sometimes just follow you for a few kilometers through the mountains. Sometimes you meet people, and a lot of them live quite traditional in a traditional way, like this man in Albania. And there's plenty of landscapes like this. You meet other animals, and the Balkans are also called the blue part of Europe, and that's because of their rivers that are extremely wild, intact, and the diversity, the biodiversity there is incredible compared to other parts of Europe. So here is a picture from Bosnia with the Neretva River. You might know it from pictures from Mostar, where people jump from the old bridge in Mostar. And it is impressive, especially when you know that the Neretva River doesn't get any warmer than 7 degrees Celsius in the summer, so it's ice cold. Vjosa River is another famous river from the Balkans. It goes through Albania, and it has recently been designated Europe's first wild river national park. So it runs untamed, almost from the source all the way to the sea. And well, the government of Albania was very close to destroying this incredible wild river by building some hydropower plants. But luckily, the locals didn't allow it to happen. They started protesting. A lot of international NGOs got involved. Even Leonardo DiCaprio got involved, and so the protests managed to stop the developments on the river, and now it is a national park. Another beautiful river is Socha in Slovenia, which is perfect for rafting or kayaking, but it's also just amazing to cycle along the way. Of course, the Balkans are not just nature. It is incredible how much cultural diversity there is on such a small circle. So we have, of course, a lot of places where you can clearly see the impact of the Ottoman Empire. So this is the city of Berat in Albania. That's also called a city of thousand windows, with those small stone houses with cute windows. Sarajevo is another place where the cultural diversity is so visible. It's simply one of my favorite cities in the world, just because you can see so many cultures, so many different influences crossing there. And yeah, it's just a completely different world that is surprisingly close from us. Of course, in Sarajevo, there's quite a lot of mosques. There's quite a lot of Muslim buildings, Muslim architecture. In general, a lot of places in Bosnia. In a lot of places in Bosnia, you see this strong presence of Islam, which yeah, contributes to beautiful soundscape as well. As like, for example, this one where I was camping near the Lake Jablanica. I don't know if you can hear. I hope you could hear that was just a call to prayer in the evening. So that's one of my favorite sounds in Bosnia when I'm cycling there, and in the evening you just hear the call to prayer, which is just such a unique experience. Um, of course, there is a lot of different religions and cultures that intertwine in the Balkans. They mix together, and there are a lot of unique buildings, a lot of unique places that are completely unknown, and you cannot even find them in any guidebooks on any travel blogs. So on the left side of this slide, you can see the church in Korcha, which is, well, this is the basilica, this is the big church, quite known. But on the right side, you have a small church near Korcha, which I discovered completely randomly, just wandering around. And it turned out it's from 12th or 13th century with original frescoes. And it wasn't even shown on Google Maps. So if you travel by bike in the Balkans, it's good to just take your time, stop often, and just appreciate this kind of beauty. And this way you can see so many completely hidden gems that are absolutely not known to mass tourists. Another very, very interesting place for people who are interested in history and culture is Ohrid in North Macedonia, which is sometimes called the Jerusalem of the Balkans. And something that I loved about this region is this kind of nostalgia after Yugoslavia. So most of the Western Balkans used to be one country, Yugoslavia, and you see some small traces of that, such as, for example, those old Yugoslav cars, such as Yugo or Zastava, very cute, very colorful. And some people miss the old times of Yugoslavia so much that they even named their camping Yugoslavia. So this is camping Yugoslavia near the border between Montenegro and Bosnia, where I was served tea in a mug with the Marshal Tito club. So with the old Yugoslavian dictator. On the bazaar in Skopje, Macedonia, you can also get some uniforms from Yugoslavia. Albania, on the other hand, wasn't part of the Yugoslavia. It was a communist country as well, and it had a paranoid ruler, Enver Hoxha, who built plenty of bunkers because he was scared irrationally that his country is going to be invaded either by Yugoslavia or some other country. And so whenever you cycle through Albania, you're gonna concrete bunkers everywhere, even in people's gardens. And because this communist regime in Albania was so strict that people could not own anything, they couldn't own a car either. So after the collapse of the communist regime, people rushed to buy cars. Mercedes are the most popular brand there, and because people are so happy to finally be able to own a car, there are also a lot of car washes. So this word lavash is one of the few words that I know in Albanian, just because I saw it so many times next to the road. There was a car wash because Albanians just love to take care of their cars, just have to keep their cars clean and shiny. Of course, when we think about the Balkans, we think about the Balkan War as well. And especially when you cycle through Bosnia, you see things like this. So you see different memorial sites that remind you of the events from 30 years ago. And still, after almost 30 years, there are still some places where you can find landmines. So if you see a sign like this, don't leave the road, just stay there, because there might be still some mines. And this is a cemetery in Sarajevo, where most of the graves have dates. The date of death is between 1992 or 1996. So that was a short story of what the Balkans are like in general. Of course, I could be talking about it more and more because I just scratched the surface. The region is so complicated, so diverse, so incredibly rich, but we are here to talk about cycling. So what is cycling in the Balkans like? So a lot of people cycle through the Balkans their way to Asia or on the way when they're just touring all around the world. Such as, for example, on this picture we have Nathan, a cyclist from the Netherlands. I met him in Albania. He was cycling to Kyrgyzstan. And here's a picture from the outskirts of Tirana when we were trying to escape the big storm. And a lot of people who cycle in the Balkans want to cycle along the coast. So the Adriatic coast is beautiful, and the sea is warm, clean. The landscapes are simply stunning, but in my opinion, the coast is not the best place to cycle in the Balkans. So there is this Eurovelo 8 route that leads along the coast. And a lot of cyclists decide to choose it, but unfortunately, a lot of the time you either cycle on busy main roads with a lot of cars, especially during the summer. And sometimes when the Eurovelo leads you to like some smaller paths off the road, you end up in situations like this. This is in Croatia, where we just had to carry our fully loaded bike up the stairs. The stairs are much longer than you can see in this picture, so it wasn't a pleasant thing to do. So in my opinion, it's best to go to the mountains. Even though it's harder, it's physically demanding. There's a lot of climbing, and the roads are sometimes not the best. So sometimes you have mud, you have stones, you have really, really poor road. Sometimes you start questioning your choice. You start thinking, asking yourself, why am I even here? Why am I doing that? But then you just look around and you have landscapes like this just for yourself, and there's not a living soul within 20 kilometers. And there are also like a lot of beautiful mountain roads with great asphalt, where you can ride smoothly for kilometers with no cars, with no people. So the Balkans are developing quickly, and there are a lot of new highways being built, which means that the old roads are almost empty. There are almost no cars, almost no traffic. So, for example, in North Macedonia, there were a lot of highways with those small old roads that were running parallel. And yeah, there you just have the best views on a perfectly good asphalt just for yourself without having to worry about safety, about cars, about traffic. What about the water? So, as I mentioned before, in the Balkans, you often cycle long stretches through the mountains, and there are no shops, no villages, but usually the water is not an issue. There are plenty of water fountains where you can just refill your bottles, and the water is cold, fresh, and tasty. Sometimes they look pretty, like the one on the left side, and sometimes they just look like a tap. And there is like an old thing or something like that. but you don't really need to worry about the water. The quality is great. It goes straight from the mountains. When it comes to food, the Balkans or the Balkan cuisine is generally quite meat based. They love traffic, they love grilled meat. But there is a lot of vegetarian dishes. So I'm a vegetarian, and I never really had an issue with finding some food in the Balkans. Worst case, you order a shopska salad with cheese and some fries. But most of the time, you get some baked vegetables or grilled vegetables filled with cheese or some barley or something else. And so even as a vegetarian, you can find a lot of delicious food, and the vegetables in the Balkans are so tasty. They have so much flavor. But my favorite to-go food is burek. So this is some filo pastry, quite greasy, quite heavy, but very, very energy dense. So perfect snack for the road. Usually it's filled with spinach, cheese, or sometimes meat. And of course, you have a lot of fresh fruits that you can just find next to the road. Or there are people selling watermelons. Of course, on a bike, you don't really want to carry a watermelon, but if you sometimes stop in one place for 2 days or so, you can just get the whole watermelon. And I would just eat half of it on one evening because it's also perfect for hydration. And if you need some extra energy, the Bosnian coffee is a perfect way to get some. So if you cycle in Italy, you stop for an espresso. If you cycle in Bosnia, you stop for Bosnian coffee with some sugar, and you can keep on cycling for a long, long time. And this is one thing that I usually warn other people from. This is rakia. So this is a very, very high percentage alcoholic drink that you can find all over the Balkans. It's quite okay when it comes to the taste, but it's super strong. So if someone in the Balkans invite you home and they want to share their homemade rakia with you, and you still have a lot of kilometers ahead of you, I would be very, very careful and just take a small glass, a small sip. That's it. And if you're ever in a Balkan home and open a fridge and you see a plastic bottle, you always need to sniff it first before you drink because it might be rakia and not water or soda. Um, so- and so the Balkans are also perfect place for wild camping. There's so much open space with beautiful landscapes where you can simply just pitch your tent and yeah, and just relax, rewind for the evening. This is my campsite in North Macedonia on the shore of Lake Prespa. This was the view on the other side. And this is my campsite in Albania. Those are also views from my campsite in Albania from the Tep Valley. Oftentimes you can find a river or a stream where you can refresh after the long day on a bike. But if you're not into wild camping, if you're scared of doing it alone, or if you prefer to have a shower after cycling, it's not a problem. There are a lot of small campsites where you can stay with beautiful views. Here is one of my favorite campsites in Albania. It's near the city of Permet. The owner, Donna, is such a kind and lovely woman, such an interesting person. And yeah, the views were amazing. The shower was there. So I was simply happy and I decided to stay for a bit longer than one night. I don't always come when I travel on a bike. And in the Balkans, it's actually super easy also to book accommodation. I usually just use booking.com to find something on the same day. And I never had a problem, never had to plan anything in advance. Warm showers also exist in the Balkans. There are not a lot of posts, but this is a photo from Albania near Skode. There was some sort of foundation that had their like a big house there where they organized a lot of activities for the community, and they hosted cyclists there as well. And last year in the Balkans, a new bicycle route was launched, Trans Dinarica, and it's a huge project that I was very excited when I first heard about it ages ago. And I was super happy to hear that last year it was finally officially launched. I would say this is one trail to rule them all. It is a bicycle route that connects 8,000 countries: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Albania. And it is in total 5,500 kilometers long. And of course, most people don't cycle the whole route. Also, it's not really the point that people would cycle the whole length. There are many different options that you can choose depending on how much time you have. There are some loops that you can do. And the great thing about Trans Dinarica is that it makes cycling in the Balkans just so much easier. When I first came to the Balkans, it's super challenging. So I often ended up on either main roads with a lot of cars or on some really bad dirt roads, because there was no way of knowing which road would be the best. So Trans Dinarica makes this planning so much easier. Also because they have very detailed navigation with a lot of information, a lot of points of interest, such as the water sources, for example, or warnings about maybe roads with a lot of traffic, or maybe bad quality gravel roads. And so to access this detailed navigation, you actually need to buy the navigation pack from the website. And the total navigation pack of the entire route costs 176 euros, which seems like a lot, but when you think about how much information you actually get from it, it is not so expensive. You can also just choose a navigation pack for a specific country, and for example, I believe it was 20 euros, which is not really more than guidebook that you would buy. So in my opinion, it is worth it. It's also, I think it's also a good thing to do to support the local community, because the route is built by local cyclists, and by purchasing the navigation pack, you basically allow them to keep working, to keep the route up to date, and and help them sustain the route. So there's no signs along the road. You just need to follow the navigation pack. If you don't want to pay for the navigation pack, of course, there's a lot of information available on the website, which basically is enough to find your way around, to know where to go. So it's not necessary to pay. It's just more convenient when you have the full navigation pack. And the purpose of Trans Dinarica was actually to help also the local communities stay in where they come from, to help them make a living. Because in the Balkans, a lot of tourists just go to the same places. A lot of tourists just flock to the coast. There are a few places in the mountains where most people visit. There's a lot of small villages, little towns where there is no tourism, but where you have beautiful views, a lot of interesting sites, and where people just shouldn't So if those places were somewhere in Italy or Spain or France, there will be plenty of tourists, but just because some areas of the Balkans are less developed, not a lot of people know about those places. So the creators of Trans Dinarica just wanted to help people discover those places so that more cyclists come to other places in the Balkans and support the local community. Because as one of the Trans Dinarica's creators, Jan Klavoja, told me, cyclists are good tourists. They are hungry, they travel slow, so they they just eat a lot. They just need a place to sleep, and they are grateful for that. They don't need fancy hotels. They don't need much, and they want to connect with the locals as well. So here are a few pictures from Trans Dinarica. This one is the Tep Valley in Albania, which part of this route is actually one of the most challenging sections, as you can see in this video. Sometimes you need to push your bike. Sometimes it's a lot of work. The Trans Dinarica also brings you to some of the most known places, such as Ohrid. This is the Sedlo Pass in Montenegro in the Durmitor Mountains, one of the most beautiful mountain roads that I've ever cycled, although it was quite an unpleasant experience because of the rain and the cold. So that was in the first half of September, but up in the mountains on the 1,800 meters, it was freezing cold. Yeah, along the way you find a lot of lakes, such as Boyačko Lake, for example, in Bosnia, empty mountain roads, some weird old abandoned buildings. And yeah, this is what I was talking about. So Trans Dinarica goes through some villages and towns that are almost abandoned or will be abandoned in a couple of years if people don't find a way to make a living there. So hopefully cycling can help to bring some more tourists there and help people stay. This is another picture from last year's trip on Trans Dinarica. So this is in Bosnia on the Lashnica Mountains. And yeah, first half of September was already snowing. So you need to be prepared for all kinds of weather if you go cycling on this route, because even in the summer on the high in the mountains, you can expect some snow. But then on the other hand, a bit lower, it might be scorching hot. So you never know what to expect. You need to pack both sunglasses and sunscreen and warm clothes and a raincoat. And a very good thing about Trans Dinarica is that although most of it goes through remote places, small villages, mountains, it also has connections to the major cities, which means that it's easy for people who arrive to the Balkans by train, by plane. So you don't need to think too much about logistics, because a lot of those beautiful cycling trails, they just start far away and end far away, and there's not always public transit that can bring you to the end and the start of the route, and that's getting out of the city, getting into the city. So Trans Dinarica, the creators thought about it. They made some links between the main route and the bigger cities, so that it's easier for people to basically start when they arrive in the main hub and just get on the bike and just get into the wild. And yeah, and I have to say that cycling in the Balkans alone never feels lonely. First of all, because the locals are just so welcoming and kind. And second of all, because you always meet some other travelers as well. So here is another couple that I met during my trip in Albania. They were cycling all the way to Australia, I think. So yeah, if you come there alone, you will sooner or later meet some other travelers and connect with them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you want to learn more about cycling in the Balkans, you can visit my blog, wobblyride.com, or you can just follow me on Instagram, and that's my handle over there. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer the questions.
Right, thank you, thank you, Joanna. Sorry, I got a bit of feedback there. Yeah, it certainly brings back memories. I cycled from Greece up to the Italian border back in 2013, so over a decade now ago. And looking at those pictures, it brings back good memories of that cycle. Although I stuck to the coast, and I remember, for example, in northern Albania, getting to the point where you see the Albanian Alps and thinking, wow, they're called Alps for a good reason. They're serious
Yeah.
mountains. But I stuck to
They
the
are, but
coast.
back then it was much harder to cycle there because there was no asphalt roads to have at that point, I think.
Yeah. Well, I didn't venture away from the coast, but yeah, perhaps I should go back. Right, there's quite a few questions. First of all, the your route planning. Did you use a particular way of route planning? Obviously, when you were using the Trans Dinarica, presumably you were following the set route. But when you were in other areas, did you use Komoot or anything like that?
So on my first tour, as I mentioned, I didn't really have a plan. I was using a Czech mapping app that's called Mapy CZ, and I was just trying to come up with a random route without really knowing about Komoot at that time. I was also doing some volunteering in Bosnia, and then my workaway host in Bosnia recommended me the route to Jablanica, which was super helpful because otherwise I would have taken the route that was much more busy and much less spectacular. But no, later on in Albania, I was using a bit of Komoot, and it turned out pretty good.
And regarding the Trans Dinarica, to what extent is it on road or off road?
So 80% is roads, asphalted roads. About 20% is gravel, and it depends on the country. So in some countries, for example, I believe in Macedonia and Albania, almost 90% is on paved roads.
So you were on what looked like a mountain bike. Is that a good bike to
Yes.
use? Would you recommend another type of bike?
Yes, so I use a mountain bike just because that's the bike I have. And I would say gravel bike, touring bike, perfect for that. I wouldn't say, yeah, very thin tires because every now and then you are on some more rougher roads. So it's good to have a bit wider tires, but the gravel is fine. Touring bike is fine.
Uh, Dogs. Did you have any problems with dogs, or have you had problems with dogs in any of the areas of the Balkans?
Not in the Western Balkans. The only place where I found dogs a bit scary was northern Greece. Actually, the Greek dogs are a bit angrier. The Balkan dogs are usually quite sweet, quite nice. They follow you sometimes, but they're really really sweet. Shepherd dogs can be a bit territorial, so I always recommend just getting off your bike, talking to them, being calm, and just I kind of ask them permission to pass, and that usually works. I know I met one guy who was traveling in Albania and to the Balkans at the same time as when I was there. and he was a bit scared of dogs, and he had a few encounters in Bosnia that discouraged him. But yeah, I cannot say that I had the same experience.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's perhaps one day there should be a talk on how to deal with dogs, because
Yeah.
everybody seems to have their own piece of advice. I was once given the advice of carrying butter and throwing little bits of butter at dogs, but I thought, well, since I do most of my cycling in the summer, I don't think the butter would have
Yeah,
lasted that long.
that's a problem. It would be a bit melting and
Yeah,
sticky.
I think it would just make
Yeah,
my thighs more appealing to a passing dog. But anyway,
probably.
um, uh, the time of year. I was in Albania, Montenegro in the middle of July, and it was very, very hot. Um, I don't think it rained once. So, what has been your experience in terms of the weather, and when would you recommend that people go?
So it kind of depends where exactly you go, and there's not really no perfect time. So usually it's between April and early October. But of course, up in the mountains, you can expect some snow. So I was in Albania in April, and in Tef there was still snow. But on the coast, it was absolutely scorching hot. And then in July in Albania, I was struggling a lot. Uh, for me, September is kind of a perfect time. I would say May and September is a perfect, it's kind of a perfect balance. But you never know because sometimes, yeah, the weather changes very, very fast. So on my last trip, the first day I was completely dying because it was too hot, and then later on I was freezing. So
Yeah, I suppose it's the same throughout Europe, isn't it? Well, apart from perhaps Northern Europe, where May, June time and September, beginning of October is the sweet spot because you obviously don't have the very hot weather, but it's slightly out of season, so it's quieter in terms of the traffic, and the accommodation is open. Campsites will probably be open, but they're not booked out by people who are heading off during the busy months of July and August. Um, just on the topic of accommodation, um, you, by the sounds of it, you spent most of your time wild camping. You did mention the campsites occasionally. Um, did you find accommodation easy to find when you were looking for it?
yeah, so I wouldn't even say I was mostly wild camping. I would say mostly camping, but it's 50-50, like normal campsites and wild camping. And looking for accommodation was super easy in my opinion. So I usually just check the day before or in the morning, I check where are the potential places where I could stop, like so bigger towns where there is some bed and breakfast or something like that. And then I never book anything in advance, and I've never been in a situation that I didn't have a place to stay. I never even have had a situation that I would have to camp because there was no place to stay. So I met some people traveling, I think that was in Albania as well, who didn't have a tent at all. And they said they didn't have any issue as well.
Um, Daniel has asked. I'll answer Daniel's question. Joanna is Polish, so her mother tongue is Polish. She speaks excellent English, obviously, but you actually speak quite a few languages. I seem to remember from when I spoke
I
to you for the
do, yes.
podcast. Um, in terms of communication with people in the Balkans, is English the lingua franca?
Yes and no. So the younger population in most Balkan countries speaks quite decent English. Um, the older people not so much. So for me, it was easier because Polish is a little bit similar to Serbo-Croatian. So in all the Slavic countries, so except for Albania and Kosovo, I could sometimes use Polish words that were similar to the Serbian ones, for example. Um, in Bosnia, for example, or Montenegro, a lot of people who don't speak English might speak German. So if you speak any German, that might help. In Albania, a lot of people speak Italian as well. So that's another one. But I think the level of English is improving quite quickly. So yeah, occasionally, of course, you're gonna meet people who don't speak English, but then Google Translate is your skill. You're just sign language and gestures.
Daniel, the same Daniel, he asks a question. Not 100% sure if I'm understand quite what he's saying here, but I'll read out what he's written. He said, "I'm interested in farming being about growing food for subsistence rather than just a means of making money. Would you be able to say which areas may be best for this?" Um, I think perhaps um, um, perhaps Daniel is asking, where can you go and find people who are perhaps growing food on allotments or the equivalent of an allotment, that kind of thing, rather than mass agro industry.
I'm not really sure, but from what I know, what I have experienced, what I have seen, for example, in Albania, there is a lot of small farmers that just grow vegetables and crops, just a very basic old school way. So organic, you could say. Macedonia is another place, or Montenegro. But I think, yeah, all the Balkans, they have a very, very good climate also for farming. So I'm not really sure what would be the best place, but I think the Balkans are a place to go, yes, for this. And I think there's still a lot of this knowledge that people have that how to do it the way they've always been doing it without um, yeah, too many modern inventions.
Yeah, and I suppose bearing in mind the recent history of being communist countries, then I think there's probably a lot of people who still have in their psyche the and knowledge to grow their own food because of the general scarcity of food in more difficult times in their recent past. So I would imagine they're probably a lot better at growing food than we are, say, here in Britain.
Yes, interesting fact though, in Albania, people were not allowed to do that at some point because there was like a lot of yeah, poverty, of course, and people started growing their own vegetables to help that. But then the government, the dictator, that's not allowed. That's private property. We cannot allow that.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Um, did you always feel safe traveling on your own?
So I would say mostly yes. I wouldn't say always, but I also wouldn't say I always feel safe anywhere else. So compared to most other places where I traveled, I would say yes, I usually feel pretty safe. So I always, of course, I'm a bit careful when I'm on my own. Um, I if I have a gut feeling that something is wrong, I'm just trying to leave the place as fast as possible. But yeah, most of the time it was fine. So even while camping, mm, I didn't find it too scary there. Even though I usually do have a bit of reservations over that when I'm on my own.
You mentioned the fact that there was a navigation pack available for the Trans Dinarica. Where is that available? Is that on their website?
Yes, so it's on transdinarica.com. I can just put it in the chat quickly
Okay.
so that
Um,
everybody can see.
yeah, I actually put that URL in the chat a little bit earlier, and then
Okay,
Richard,
good.
rather humorously, he then responded and he put another link in saying he'd found this write-up, and it's actually the write-up on your website. So he must have Googled Trans Dinarica, and you must have popped
Oh
up
yes,
first on the list.
I wrote a few articles for my website. I also wrote one for the BBC, BBC Travel. So if someone's interested, you can just Google Trans Dinarica BBC. That's my article on there. yeah, as well.
Brenda would like to know which part of Poland you're from.
I'm from the north, so not far from Gdańsk, not far from the coast.
And is that a good place to go cycling? Would you recommend Poland?
Absolutely, yes. Poland is amazing for cycling. So in the region where I come from, you have, of course, the Eurovelo 10, which is the Baltic Sea route. Really, really nice, quite easy, quite flat, family friendly. Um, South of Poland is beautiful with the mountains. So there is a very, very nice cycle trail around the Tatra Mountains, which is on the border with Poland and Slovakia. So yeah, Poland is great for cycling.
And actually, you're speaking to us from, don't think you mentioned this earlier, but you're currently in Malta.
Yes.
And would you recommend cycling in Malta?
Not really, not unless you have to or really want to. So Malta is great. It has a lot of beautiful architecture, very, very rich history, and great weather. It's sunny here 300 days a year. So for all the British people that want some sun, come here. Uh, but unfortunately, cycling here is not great. There are too many cars, so there are more cars than people, and the roads are not super cycle friendly. There is a smaller island of Gozo, that is also part of Malta, and cycling is much nicer there. It's super hilly though. It's quite challenging.
Peter is going to Bosnia and Montenegro in the summer, and he wants to know, do you personally have any GPS routes which are available from your website, for example?
I have a few from Bosnia for sure on my website. For Montenegro, I don't think I have the GPS files directly there, but I for sure in my on my website I have some links to the to some of the most scenic routes in Montenegro, which one of them is I think it's called Salty and Sweet, which is part of it overlaps with the Trans Dinarica through the mountains. So you can find a lot of nice routes with the GPS tracks available. Yeah.
Emma, she says she she says you sound as though you're on the road quite a bit. Are you lucky enough to be sponsored, or how do you find working as you travel?
So I'm not as much on the road as it seems. So my last cycle adventure was yeah, the Balkan one in September. Since then, I haven't really cycled. But yeah, I work remotely. I teach Norwegian online, so that helps me, yeah, make some money while giving me some flexibility, so I can still do my work even on the bike. I sometimes do. If I find a place where I can just yeah, have some quiet space to teach my students. Um, I'm currently not really looking for sponsors. Although if some biking company was interested, I wouldn't say no. That would be awesome, absolutely.
Yeah, I wish I could do my job remotely. I teach French, but I've got to turn up at work 5 days a week
Oh, too bad.
to teach French.
Yeah, I
Right.
love online.
Yeah. Right. I think we've answered all of the questions there. I think I'm just having a quick glance in the chat to make sure that we've not missed anything. But thank you for that. What are your plans for the rest of 2025? Are you heading back to the Balkans at all?
Not sure yet. I might be, but that's not gonna be the number one plan for sure. For now, we know that in spring I'm probably gonna go to Slovenia, I think. And in the summer, I haven't decided yet. I have still something big on my list, which is the Pamir Highway in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. And I've been planning to do that for ages, so I hope maybe this year, but I don't know yet.
Wow, that's a big plan.
It
That's one
is.
of those things that gets mentioned at the cycle touring festival every so often, and you kind of watch these people and you watch it half in admiration and half in horror.
Yes,
but the tales
definitely.
that they
It's
come
type
back
2
with.
fun.
Yes, well, I think it's probably type 3 fun from my perspective. But
Definitely,
anyway,
yes.
but yeah, that's been fascinating. So thank you for that, Joanna. Thank you for everyone who has tuned in. A reminder that today has barely started in terms of the Cycle Touring Festival. In reverse order, at 8 p.m., I think it is tonight, you can hear all about cycling along the Norwegian coast. It's a pity you didn't teach us some Norwegian when you were during your talk. At 7 o'clock, you can hear from Cycling UK about the Marcher Castles route. And then coming up at 5 p.m., so just under an hour, you've got Tim Sanders and some bloke called Andrew Sykes, and they're talking about cycling on Shetland and Orkney. So if you come back in an hour, then you can hear that. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Joanna,
Thank you so much.
and happy cycling.
Happy cycling.